Hello and welcome to the World Built Environment Forum webinar series. In this webinar, we will be discussing Proptech, what changed in 12 months. Has adoption increased? Which technologies are being favored? And what are the innovative ways that Proptech is being used in the built environment? My name is John Krause. I'm Director of External Affairs at RICS. And we have three industry experts taking part in the discussion today. And I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. So firstly, Zach Schwartzman, partner at Metaprop.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zach Schwartzman. I'm a partner here at Metaprop. We are an early stage venture capital firm that is entirely dedicated to investing in Proptech. We have invested in over 100 companies in this space now across our team and managed venture funds. We manage capital on behalf of institutional players, primarily from the real estate industry, who represent about 15 billion square feet around the globe that they either directly own, operate, manage, or otherwise service.
Thank you, Zach. Also joining us is Anthony Walker, Chief Executive Officer at Go Report.
Thanks, John. Good afternoon. My name is Anthony Walker. I'm the Chief Executive Officer at Go Report, who are a leading provider of software to the property sector that creates efficiencies in capturing data on site, generating reports, and carrying out analysis of that data to enable really more informed investment decisions to be made. We were very lucky in the last and current version of RSS Modus to be judged as one of the 20 hottest prospects in Proptech and who are ahead of the game. In addition, I'm very active within the RSS. I'm a fellow, past chair of the RSS Building Surveying UK board, member of the Building Surveying Journal, editorial advisory group, speaker at conferences, and regularly actually provide articles for RSS journals. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Anthony. And our third expert with us today is Hamed Sigari Sales, Chairman of the Construction, Blockchain and Smart Contracts Committee.
Hi, everyone. So I'm part of the quantity surveying section of the RICS, and I've been a quantity surveyor since the early 1990s. I'm principally involved with a company called CostOS, which provides software for the delivery of big construction projects. That's estimating and cost control and benchmarking, which is a new field that's emerging. But for the last 2 years, I've been chairing a group of industry companies looking at some new technology that seems to be emerging, blockchains and smart contracts. And we're trying to see if it's something that's going to have an impact on the construction industry, maybe the wider world, and if we should take note of it. We've come into the end of a pilot phase where we'll do a wrap up and recommendations.
Thank you to all of our panelists. So I'm going to start with the first question. The first topic is really about who is driving investment into Proptech. When we looked at investment in our Proptech webinar a year ago, we saw there was not only increased venture capital appetite, but also that established major real estate players were getting on board the technology train, understanding the impact that Proptech will have and starting to invest. So, Zach, I'm going to turn to you first. Is the pace of investment continuing? What's the current mix between venture capital and the major real estate players? How is this evolving? Over to you.
Well, it's a good question. I think when we look at activity in any segment of the technology sector broadly, one of the ways we judge the level of activity is by how much innovation capital, how much venture capital is flowing into that sector. Proptech has probably grown faster than any other segment of the broader tech industry over the last 5 or 6 years, and it's only really continued to accelerate over the last 12 months. For some reference points, exact figures tend to fluctuate depending on who's measuring them and what's being measured as Proptech. But if you blend the different estimates together, Proptech as a sector has grown from under $500 million invested annually in 2013 to roughly 10 billion that was invested in 2018. I mean, that is just astronomical growth. And last year beat 2017 numbers in terms of dollars dedicated to the sector. We are now regularly seeing months that have over $1 billion worth of venture capital flowing into prop tech companies. I mean, again, this is a sector that annually used to command half of that innovation capital attention. And the beginning of 2019 has been stronger than the beginning of 2018. So it is at the moment an ever upward trajectory. In terms of where the capital is coming from, you really have a broad mix of players. You have dedicated prop tech venture capital funds such as ourselves. We often raise a substantial portion of our capital from the real estate industry proper. So in some ways we represent the real estate industry, but with a dedicated venture capital lens and expertise and focus. You have the real estate industry itself. You've seen different formats of the real estate industry getting involved as investors. Sometimes they are spinning up their own in-house corporate venture capital units like JLL Spark or Brookfield Ventures. You are seeing some folks investing off their balance sheet. And then you have the generalist venture capital community, the folks who would invest in, enterprise SaaS or self-driving cars or prop tech. And those folks have become quite aggressive. I would say one of the most notable players is a name that may be familiar to some on the call, which is SoftBank. They have, first of all, in terms of scale, the largest venture capital funds used to be roughly $3 billion in size. SoftBank has a vision fund that's gained a lot of notoriety. It's $100 billion, and they're coming out with a second one. They have not been shy about their intention to dedicate roughly as much of their venture capital funding to prop tech as real estate represents as a sector of the global economy, so 15 to 20% or so. And they've certainly been doing that. They're the biggest money behind Open Door, behind WeWork, behind Compass, a variety of others. So you have a lot of capital that's coming in, and a lot of it is waiting for companies to begin to mature and get past the Series A, Series B, get up to the point that they have, 30 to 50 people, 30 to 100 people, and then capital becomes very readily available, which we can get into in a second topic.
Thanks, Zach. So I think a big new piece of information for me there is this idea of the venture capital funds that are not dedicated to prop tech, haven't traditionally been in the prop tech field, now coming in quite a significant scale, and obviously can have a very big impact. I'm wondering, Ahmed, when you hear how Zach describes the picture, does that sound familiar to what you're seeing in the market?
Yeah, it's interesting actually. So just continuing on, SoftBank has been investing in blockchain technology, and there's a similar story actually that's emerging from blockchain technology, which is that it's gone from a relatively new technology to attracting hundreds of millions a year in investment from venture capitalists. To last year, it was over $5 billion. And one of the largest investments that was made by venture capitalists was a property technology company that's done this overlap between PropTech and FinTech. And so there is a lot of overlap that we're kind of starting to see now as the property industry adopts technology. It makes it easier for venture capitalists and new players to come in, people that weren't interested in property in industry before. So that is interesting. There's also an interesting aspect that the governments are starting to push technology generally, which is causing technology companies that had been in the space early on, it's pushed their valuations up quite a lot. And Autodesk is one example. So Autodesk, they have been in the market since 1986 when they were a startup, and they produce technology that allows the creation of 3D models, the digital design. So it really taken over from CAD drawings, and it's now a mainstay tool of a lot of architects around the world. And their company valuation, saw a 300% increase over 15 to 18 year period leading up to about 2011, 2012. And when the UK government said that it was going to mandate the use of technology to drive efficiencies, the return that the shareholders saw from the stock market listed Autodesk went up to, I think it's about 500 or 600% in as much, 5-year period as opposed to a 15 to 20-year period. So governments saying that they want to mandate something now is pushing companies to invest, and that's leading to venture capitalists and funds wanting to invest and get exposure to this market. So it's probably just a little bit of a different perspective on where the growth is coming from.
Yeah, so the venture capital funds definitely there, definitely encouraged, it seems, by statements of intent and policy by government. Anthony, how do you see the drivers for investors at the moment?
Yeah, some really interesting points both picked up by the guys there. I think probably one thing I would add to that is what I've seen over the last year is the existing Proptech companies who want to accelerate growth, the breadth of their offer and increase revenues. And we've seen a number of consolidations in the market over the last year. I don't think there's any sign of those decreasing. So what you've got there is a number of them are driven by organisations, but equally a number of them tend to be driven by estate owners and operators within that field who want to get more maximum return on their investment. So it's an ever increasing changing landscape out there, and one that's moving very fast.
Thank you. I'd like to just take that on to the next question, which is around the technologies that are actually attracting the greatest investment. We heard just there mention of the overlap between property and fintech, and the huge interest in 3D modeling that companies like Autodesk have been leading on. So I just would like to know, from, again, turning to you in the first instance, Zach, what is the innovation that is really now attracting investors? Is it the same as last year? Is it the same technology that's attracting them, or have new technologies become more or less attractive than they were a year ago?
Well, one of the things that is really intriguing about real estate as an end market for technology is that it is simply so vast. The largest sector of the global economy, the largest contributor to global GDP, it has so much innovation debt as being one of the last industries to wholesale adopt technology, that there are many different areas to play. And so we specialize in very early stage tech. It's our job to find what's really the next generation of great technology companies before they become known to the world. And we have always maintained a very wide investment scope. So we will invest in companies that touch every asset type across real estate, major food groups, and a lot of the specialty use categories. We will invest in technologies that touch every value chain category. We basically map out every job function that a real estate professional performs from dirt to disposition. And we look for technology that is going to both help those professionals do their jobs better, faster, more efficiently. And we also look for technology that's going to more fundamentally alter the nature of how those jobs are performed. I mention that because it's not an accident that we have such a broad scope. It is very difficult in a market that is moving this fast and that is this vast to say, oh, for sure, the most compelling new technology is going to come out of this area or that area. The truth is, it's happening all over the place. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of companies now that have emerged that are going after basically every job category in real estate and every component of the value chain. It's happening all across the globe. We're based in New York. We have counterparts on the West Coast in the States. London is a very active community. Many different pockets of innovation across the EU. From Berlin to Amsterdam into Asia. It's really a global game. So first thing is it's really broad. One of the trends that has emerged over the last, I'd say 2 or 3 years though, is the rise of what folks in the venture community would call full stack startups. What that basically means is think of a company like WeWork or Compass or Open Door, some of the best funded companies around. Those companies, outside of their immediate intentions, are having a really profound impact on the real estate industry's relationship with PropTech. So those companies are in a very different category than a company like Autodesk, which really makes software that it intends to sell into existing players in the real estate industry. The full stack companies are going out and directly challenging incumbent players in real estate with new tech enabled models. They require a lot more capital to pull off, but that capital is now available. They tend to operate at lower margin, but take more of the transaction. And they are a direct challenge to, the existing hotel operators, existing office developers, existing residential brokerage companies. And what that is spurring is a reaction from those traditional incumbent players who are now looking to PropTech and saying, what solutions can you provide to me that will help me compete with the WeWorks, the Open Doors, the Compasses of the world? Because now I have competitive pressure placed on my business and changing expectation from my consumer. And that to me is one of the most profound shifts that we've seen in the market over the last couple of years.
Thank you. And the idea of competitive edge that PropTech is going to bring is in fact the next question we're going to touch on. So we'll come back to that point. I wanted to ask Anthony at this point, is there a particular technology you see that's attracting the greatest attention, or like Zach, do you see it still as being very broad, a broad area of interest?
I'd probably agree with everything that Zach said. There's new PropTech emerging all of the time that covers a whole range of areas and focus. I'm not really seeing one that stands out. Zach will know the investment world far better than I that's attracting investment. But the only thing I would say is that certainly within the UK, there's a huge focus on the retail and office sectors that are experiencing challenges at the moment, and how they can reduce their revenue costs is one area that does seem to jump out. But there's nothing really that I would say stands out above anything else. I just think we're seeing huge amounts of technology come to the market, addressing a whole range of issues that a few years ago we wouldn't even dreamed of. So it's a really exciting place at the moment.
And Ahmed, what's your view on this? Are you seeing anything that's, if you like, one to watch in particular?
So there's two aspects to this, I think, from my perspective. One is I work on the delivery of projects, and in particular on infrastructure projects on a day-to-day basis. And some of the things that we're seeing and we're involved with is moving customers away from a piece of software that gets installed on their computer and moving it onto the cloud and moving it onto the mobile device. And that's purely from a practical point of view, in that as you have more customers, you can support them better on the cloud, and customers prefer it as well because they don't need to worry about how to install something. And the construction industry as a whole is made up of SMEs, small medium-sized enterprises, predominantly small companies. And so if you want to scale a new product within the construction industry as a starting point, having a cloud offering now is really an essential to growth. So people are becoming more amenable, and the message about just providing a logging and not having to download something is becoming an easier sell to people, and the adoption rates are much better now. But in general, I think that there's an interesting aspect that's about adoption of new technology, which is counterintuitive to some degree, but the internet is still a relatively new thing, but it's already maturing. So what we're doing now is we're introducing technologies on top of what's now becoming almost like a legacy application, the internet. And there's a big growth towards mobile and being able to work from anywhere and still be in contact. And allied to that, what I think the general trend is, there's kind of 5 or 6 really big themes that are coming through that will change the landscape. So 5G is now a thing. It's been launched now around the world, although there's some political kind of maneuverings that are going on in the background. But we've now got some 5G towers in the US and places in and around cities in the UK. That's a first step enabler of cars and vehicles that drive themselves. We've got AI and data and sensors that are going into buildings, and that's really that's another overlap between 5G, but they're essential. And there's been a lot of interest in how you can have machines to analyze how buildings work, but also how you can maximize the resale of floor space. Just having machines just crunching numbers and working out the best configurations. And they lead to this thing called a digital twin, really, which is cities having a digital version of themselves, accurate within millimeters. And that as we start to use products like Autodesk and Bentley, we're starting to get more and more digital twins now, which is great actually, because that then ties in with using AI and machine learning and sensors within buildings, and then PropTech and FinTech in general. But the number one thing that I think that we forget about with all these new emerging technologies that we're trying to adopt and try and get people to adopt is security. As we become countries and towns and cities that focus more on property technology and the enablers of property technology, we become vulnerable to nation state kind of abilities to just go after the infrastructure. So something that I think is emerging, that is quietly emerging, is there are security companies that are starting to recognize this is an opportunity to get into there. And it'll be interesting to see if there are startups that will kind of come into this space.
So security is an opportunity. That's an interesting idea, perhaps. A lot of ideas there. 5G coming in, leading self-driving cars, perhaps. AI, many other themes coming through. So I think we're starting actually to touch on this very important question, which is around, when you look at PropTech, what's the competitive edge that people can gain from this? And I think what we were seeing last year when we were talking about PropTech in one of these webinars was you had lots of companies coming in, appointing chief information or innovation or technical officers, and the conversation about technology was moving much more from the junior, if you like, newer, younger professionals through to the board level. So just wanted to ask, Ahmed, you've got the microphone, as it were. What is it that's giving people competitive edge? What is the competitive edge that you can gain from the sorts of technologies you've just mentioned?
Well, the backdrop to the construction and the property sector is that the global population is growing. It's just under 8 billion, and it's going to be approaching 10 billion in 20 or 30 years time. And within that global trend, a lot of people are moving from rural areas into the cities, and so the cities are going to become big hubs of logistical challenges. And that's where we're going to benefit from having all this new technology that we're kind of trying to foster and encourage. So the typical way to get competitive advantage is to look at ways to increase productivity, and the construction sector has by far the lowest productivity of any sector. I think there's been research that's done on that, which is a challenge, because as you have a growing population and you need to invest in infrastructure, having a low productivity market, it means that you can't spend money in other areas, because you're feeding an inefficient beast. So I think being able to demonstrate the use of technology to increase productivity, and that will mean increasing the use of technology and database applications in particular, because you can overlay other things on top of that. You can reduce the amount of information waste and make sure that the accuracy goes up, and you can start overlaying machine learning onto lots of data points as you start to get them. So being able to do more for less is still tried and tested. Can you offer solutions that enable a company to achieve far more with less people, less resources? And the construction industry, it desperately needs that, because nations won't invest in infrastructure if a lot of that money is going to be wasted, and it's a barrier to private investment.
And all sorts of challenges with construction as well around the world, around transparency and practices of labour practices and so on. So it is an area where you would think technology could really make a big impact, not just in efficiency, but in some of those wider social considerations as well. I'd like to just bring Anthony in at this point, because I know, Anthony, you've done a survey of surveyors where you asked them whether their organisation has actually got a digital strategy in place, and I believe only 38% said they had that already, and only another 19% said they were working on it, and the rest didn't think they had or knew they didn't have. What have you seen in terms of developments in bringing in digital strategies?
Yeah, so I'll probably start by saying that I think it's been touched on already. Construction is the least digitised sector, and one which has had low levels of R&D investment for many, many years. And whilst there are pockets within surveying where there's some excellent work taking place, on the whole, I'd probably say that adoption of technology is still relatively low. And what we wanted to do as part of the survey, which I led on behalf of the RSS, was try and get a real good sense of what this was. And we asked a question in relation to this, which was, where would you rank your organisation with regards to Proptech adoption on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is the lowest form of adoption? And John, if you just want to bring up the slide, I can just talk through what those figures were.
Bring up that slide right now.
Okay, thank you. So what you can see there, if we look at the slide in front of you there, almost half, 46% to be exact, scored 1 to 3, with 1 being the lowest, and over 50% actually scored it from 4 to 10. So this highlights the fact that we've got a significant issue or journey still to go on before we can get to a better place. However, since that, I've seen increasing positive signs that things are changing. I mean, many now who are employed within surveying that are far more receptive to exploring the benefits of Proptech than they probably were 12 months ago. And I think there are a few reasons for this, and probably 3 main ones. One of them is client demand. Whether they like it or not, more and more of the opportunities that surveyors pursue now have a mandatory requirement to provide data in a form that can be analysed, as opposed to historical paper-based reports, which clearly are very, very difficult to carry out any analysis on. And surveyors who are not able to demonstrate their ability to use Proptech are likely to find that their opportunities to convert them to winning opportunities are going to be restricted. Competition probably would be the second point I'd make. For surveyors to remain competitive, they need to be more productive, more efficient at what they do, and add greater maximum client value at a price they're willing to pay. If they can't compete, they're going to struggle to do that. But finally, different from the first two, which I think is really encouraging, is a change in mindset. I think what I'm seeing now are more and more surveyors who want to embrace Proptech separately from being forced, which are the 2 reasons I mentioned earlier on. And what we're seeing now, I think if we almost align this to the innovation curve, is with the risk that those right at the start, the innovators who took at the start, I think we're finding those risks be reduced now. And I think what we're finding now is we're into the early adoption stage, and I actually think we're seeing a pace of adoption increase as we go forward. There's lots more information available in terms of how we can do that and add value in terms of embracing that change, that I think if we could make more freely available, I think what we'd see is adoption increase. So once we're still at the early stages, John, of where we want to be, I think we're actually seeing a positive direction of travel that actually I think is good for the profession going forward.
Okay, so thanks very much for that. What we're going to do now is just to give the audience a question as a poll. to test your views. And also, I just want to mention that to everyone that's listening, you can submit questions as we go along. You should be able to see a question box that you can submit questions through, and we'll try and pick up those as we go along. And any that we can't, we will try and pick up with 5 minutes to go at the end. So the audience question we're going to ask you now is whether you think my organization is reluctant to invest heavily in Proptech because we're still unsure about the cost of the technology or the training to use it. We're not convinced that will justify the outlay. So that's the question, whether cost for the implementation and training is a barrier to your uptake. And the results I can give you in just a moment. Just give you a few more seconds to complete that poll, anyone that hasn't yet done so. Okay, so we've got a glitch on the poll, everyone. It's closed before enough people were able to answer it, so we're going to see if we can reopen it. So just bear with us a moment. So in the meantime, while we're waiting for that poll to come back up, we're just going to move on to the next point of discussion, which is around the challenges of the adoption of Proptech. And Anthony, I think you've got a graphic on this as well that you can take us through. So we'd like to show that on the screen and see what, if you could take us through that, that would be wonderful.
Okay, if you can bring up the slide, John, that'd be great.
Yeah, we're just doing that now.
Okay, so again, as part of the same survey that we did on Proptech, which was fed into a presentation I gave last year at the Building Surveying Conference, we asked what the biggest challenges were in terms of adoption of technology, and we got a range of answers back. And I'll just pick up the few key ones. The top one at 56% was lack of knowledge and training, and many I spoke to at the time when we were doing the survey, many I spoke to since, a lot of them have a desire to embrace technology, but struggle to understand how they would do it. They don't know where to go. They actually see it as a complex subject. So we wanted to try and get a sense of what that was. But it's clear from this, there's an element of nervousness about committing to something that they lack the confidence on to maximise its use. And there's an area there I think we need to look on in terms of how we go forward and support them as a profession. The next one shortly after, in terms of very close to that, was cost at 53%. What's very obvious when you actually engage on a survey of this type is that people see it as a cost, as opposed to a lot of us who are working in technology see it as an investment and the wider benefits that will flow from that investment. That actually picks up the point I made earlier about relatively low levels of R&D. It's not just an issue within our sector, but it's an issue within the UK as a whole. And that flows on to the next point, which was 43% unsure of ROI. Would it justify the expense? Will they be able to get board approval? And then on the same level was lack of clarity on benefits. One challenge that wasn't captured on the day was what I believe is a really big issue. It's the lack of having digital leadership in an organisation. I actually believe that's crucial. Some of the feedback that we got within the survey highlighted some frustrations that surveyors find when they're going to an organisation. It's not embracing technology. They're quite keen. And what they then do is they then leave. So those organisations who have a crucial need for someone that can take it forward finds that they can't retain onto them. And it's something that will hold even the most aspirant of individuals back within the wrong environment. But what we've probably picked up since then is that many of them now, once they start to use technology, with committing time to training and for things not going smoothly in those first stages, as it will, what you generally find with all of them that I meet is that they are incredibly positive at the end of it. So the hardest part for technology, in my opinion, is that first hurdle to commit. Once you're through that, then generally practices are in a good place. Thanks, John.
So got to make that leap, decide to commit, but people aren't necessarily doing that perhaps because they're not clear on the benefits, and they're seeing cost as a cost rather than as an investment. Zach, from your perspective, are those the familiar challenges to adoption, and are they shifting in any way?
Yeah, I mean, I would second a lot of those comments. We raise a lot of our own capital that we then use to invest in startups. We raise a lot of that from the real estate industry, and so we have the good fortune to spend a lot of time with senior folks at big brand name real estate firms of all stripes across the globe, and watch and help folks along their journey from what is often the standing start to where we believe very firmly that most leading real estate organizations will go, but nobody is at present, which is really tier one open innovation capability. We think the real estate organization of the future will look a lot more like Samsung, Apple, or Google than it does like the real estate organization of today in the way it deals with the external innovation community. I have seen that all of the issues that we just walked through are certainly present. To me, one of the things that seems to be the most common need or desire is for frameworks of how other folks are doing this. I mean, most people have really just started on this journey, and we've seen organizations of all stripes. They can be corporate, they can be total command and control structure, it can be very bottom up. All of these organizations that are buying in, eventually the sort of culminating point or the big catalyst is the mandate comes from the top. And whoever the chair is, whoever the CEO is, eventually, kind of gives one of those "thou shalt innovate" commands from on high, and then it falls to generally the rest of the C-suite to figure out how should we do that. What are our priorities going to be? How do they relate to our broader corporate priorities? How will we resource this? What modalities of engagement are we going to want to use? Should we be primarily customers here? Should we pilot a lot of different technologies? Should we try to be a tentpole customer for companies that are really relevant to us? Should we look for ways to expose our brand, to expose our people to innovation? Should we be deploying capital? Should we be buying technology as acquirers in the marketplace? Should we be building technology that we can't find in the marketplace? All of those are on the option set. What we have generally seen as companies go through their evolution and move further down the path towards tier one innovation is no matter where one starts on that journey, they tend to pretty quickly realize that in order to meaningfully engage with the startup community and be taken seriously by the best emerging companies, they need to either be directly deploying dollars into the space and be investors in some of these companies, either directly or indirectly, or that at least they need to be perceived as deploying capital into the space. And that is often how you become one of the first ports of call for some of the best companies as they come up. And being one of the first ports of call is how you wind up getting uncommon access and influence in these companies as they develop. And you can really help steer their product solutions to your company's needs and access them before your competitors and develop a real competitive edge there. But like everything else, I would just sort of conclude by saying, like everything, we really coach our partners that this is a muscle that is to be built over a there's no one period of time, but it's generally not 6 months, right? It's probably not even 12 months, and sometimes it's not 18 months. Going for small wins and building the case internally and developing your ability to engage as it makes sense for your organization going for small wins and then building on those is often a much better course of action than trying to go hit the grand slam out of the park on your first at bat.
Thanks, Zach. That's really interesting. I want to move on to the next question because I think while I've got you, this is absolutely relevant to you. So we're saying, what are the latest PropTech innovations my organization should be aware of? But in particular and specifically, we've got a question from Michael Colacino, and it is directed at you, Zach, primarily. Michael asks, what is the technology that full stack Compass provides that makes them superior to traditional brokerage models? That's the question. I'm not sure that I fully understand it, but hopefully it means something to you.
Right, it certainly means something to me. I think it's a very good question, and it's very interesting. I mean, if you look at a lot of the companies that I sort of mentioned in the category, and again, these are companies that, as opposed to building one piece of software and trying to sell it to all the existing players, instead of trying to build software for the residential brokerage industry and sell it to Douglas Elliman and Realogy and whoever else is Keller Williams and everybody else. Instead, Compass is going out and saying, we're going to be our own residential brokerage. We're going to hire brokers and we're going to equip them with a broader technology platform that will make them more efficient. And so the question for a lot of companies like that, and we are certainly seeing that as WeWork files to go public, which has a similar model, is what exactly is the technology that you're providing? And one, is it real in the first place? And then two, if it is real, this is a little more of a capital markets question, but if it is real, how much does that make you resemble a tech company versus how much does that make you resemble a traditional real estate company in your category, right? So all these companies would like to be valued at technology company multiples, which trade much higher than a residential brokerage, which trades at a relatively low multiple. And so as you put technology into the practice, how much can you change the multiple profile of the company? It is very difficult to say from the outside just how real a lot of these technology platforms are. The way I would generally characterize it is, I think a lot of these companies overpromise at their inception regarding how much technology they have at that time. And then they are able to command market share and additional capital, and usually are able to back build a lot of the technology that they're promising to the market. So in Compass's case, what it would generally argue is it is building technology that is going to enhance its brokers' ability to do their jobs. That often what they're trying to build is one software platform to rule them all, as opposed to a disparate set of tools, ways to keep brokers in the field at their highest and best use in increasing part of the day, take the administrative burden out, make sure that they are best informed around market, around customer, and that they're sort of forward and acting in their fullest capacity, fully employed, I suppose is what you would say, fully utilized. And also, if you look at Compass, they will often position that their customer is not the end home buyer. Their customer is the broker. They go out and acquire very elite brokers in premium markets around the country and now the world. And so they're really going after the high end. And they're saying, I want to provide a lot of this technology because my brokers value it. It makes their life easier. It increases their user experience and brand affinity for Compass. And I want them to stay because this is a talent business. And I think a lot of their technology is directed in that direction. Some of it's by making their broker's life easier, and some of it's by making the home buyer's experience better, so they have a better relationship with the broker and are more likely to recommend, which also benefits the broker at the end of the day. So hopefully that answers some of the question.
Yeah, Zach, that's very good. Michael, if you're let us know through the chat whether you thought that answered your question. We'd be interested to know. So this leads us actually very nicely into the next question, which is it says on your screens, how do I choose the right Proptech? But essentially, this is about saying to people, what advice would you give to potential investors and users looking to find the most appropriate technology for them? We've heard a bit about, it's partly it's a decision on what you see as your company's role, where you want to be placed in the market as to which technology you want to adopt. But I wonder, Ahmed, if you were looking for to make a decision to advise a board on which technology they should be prioritizing, what would you say to them?
That's a difficult question within the construction sector because it's so broad. It covers so many different segments. I think one of the overriding things I probably advise is that it's okay to make mistakes and it's okay to try things out. A lot of times when you choose technology, um, uh, you don't really know what it's, you know, you can have people come in and say, yeah, it's going to solve all your problems, but it's not until you actually start to deploy or the, you know, kind of change your processes that you either know whether it's going to work or not. And there's a lot of times when the introduction of new technology actually becomes a customer journey with a technology company themselves. This technology, you said to us, will solve all our problems, kind of does some of the stuff we want, but could you change it to do these things? And it's okay to, I think one of the things I've learned a lesson from the venture capital world is it's okay to invest in stuff that fails, because if you carry on doing it and you're kind of smart about it and you deploy people that are knowledgeable about your business, you can go down a journey and get it right eventually. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I find that there's this interesting. I mean, the property industry is very much about people, and so it should be. And technology should be there to help. One of the things I find interesting is that when you start talking about technology in a meeting room, in training environments, or when you're people that have the most experience in the room quieten down, and they leave the voices to those that are least experienced, which is completely the wrong thing to do. And that's because they're scared to make a bad decision or say the wrong thing. I think that will change over time because people now that are coming into senior management roles have grown up with the internet and they are not scared of technology. But currently, the decision makers have not grown up with the internet. They're aware of it, they use it, but they're still wary of it. So because we've got such a broad industry, it's very hard to say use this over use this. There are themes that are coming through. I think we've discussed those already, but I think it's don't be afraid to try things. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Engage in discussions with vendors. You will need to think about changing processes, and that's maybe quite a scary thing to do, but don't throw processes all out the window because you think a new technology is going to change everything. It's not. It's going to help, and it should help. I'm not sure if that's answered really. I mean, there's the big themes about cloud and mobile, I think, are there. I think everyone's aware of those.
Thank you very much for that. And I think actually that leads very well to our next question too, which is, if we're talking about changing processes, we're having to talk about talking to vendors and the clients about the technology we should be bringing in. Ultimately, this is going to have an impact on the work of professionals. And Anthony, this is another area where you've got a lot of experience. And I know you've done one of your surveys, and you found that as far as Proptech is concerned, members of the surveying profession were actually very, very positive about it as an opportunity. And yet we've just heard in this discussion that it also means a lot of change for them. So what is the impact you're seeing from Proptech for the work of professionals?
Yeah, when I spoke at last year's conference on the back of that survey, I ended the presentation by stating that I thought that technology that we have available now has resulted in it's never been a better time to be a surveyor, and I really passionately believe that. I think Proptech will have an incredible positive impact on real estate professionals, and you've just touched on it there. The survey that we carried out last year, 95% of those that responded saw it as an opportunity. 88% of it thought it would have a positive impact. So as with all technology throughout history and throughout the industrial revolutions that we've had from the beginning of time, jobs will change, but new jobs will present themselves as well. And I think that what we've got now is technology that enables surveyors to build upon their knowledge, their experience, their reflective thought, and provide outputs that to clients was not possible just a few years ago. And it's not about, in my opinion, making surveyors coders or software experts. It's about understanding the environment, the tools that are available, within the right structure and ideally the right digital strategy that will allow them to maximise their roles and add value that they couldn't do before. So for me, it's a massive opportunity, and it's one that, whilst we're still in the early stages of adoption, I think the general feel and general confidence levels about taking it and moving it forward to the benefit of the profession, and certainly address some of the issues in terms of recruiting new members into the profession and thinking about the future generations, it can only be a good thing.
Whereas, Zach, you're investing in companies that would see themselves as disrupting the professions. Do you think that the professionals are right to be optimistic, or do you think they should be a little more worried about what's going to be happening?
I mean, I'd be an optimist generally. I think there are companies of all stripes, and so if you look at what's happening in the world of surveying today, there are companies that are coming out who are really trying to help surveyors, ease their workflows, do their jobs in a more efficient manner with greater tools, better data, more efficiency, better user experience. They are helping firms that specialize in surveying, operate more profitably, operate at greater scale. One of the things that's interesting is when some of these technology companies and software solutions that are meant to cater to the existing professionals in the job category are first exposed, it can be a bit of a shock, because often these are industries that have not changed in a meaningful way in quite some time. I'll relay a story or a case study around the appraisal, multifamily appraisal space, because we're doing something very similar right now in site surveying that would be applicable. So we worked with a company called Bowery Valuation. They were junior appraisers themselves. They said there has to be a better way to do this job. They built a software solution that greatly enhanced the efficiency of an appraiser. It cut down on time to do an appraisal, both in the field work and the report generation, significantly, cut the cost even more significantly, and really eased turnaround times for surveyors. They went to sell that software to their existing friends in the surveying industry and potential clients, and the general reaction was, the software is absolutely amazing. We've never seen anything like it. It makes our life so much better. And when they were asked would they like to buy it, they said absolutely not. We just retrained somebody to use Microsoft Word recently. We're not really interested in introducing a new piece of software. And so what that company decided to do, and we helped them do it, was to say, look, you guys should insource your software platform and hire hire appraisers, and you should conduct your own appraisal business, and you should just operate a much more efficient cost structure. They were not only able to do that and win business, but they were able to attract some of the best talent in the marketplace, because the young talent coming out said, I would have way rather work with this young dynamic company that's using modern cutting edge software that resembles what I use in my own personal life than go to a traditional firm that is doing things in the same way it's always been done. We have a play that we're doing right now in site surveying that is very similar, and they are at a point where they can either have folks in the regular surveying or the existing surveying industry say, this is great, I'd love to try it out and bring it into my practice. It will help me recruit better. It will help me gain more efficiency in my business, my people do more work, everybody make more money. Or they can say, I'd actually rather go full stack if I don't get that reaction, and I'd like to, start doing surveys myself. It's a little TBD where that company is going to be going at the moment, but a lot of it will be driven by what's the reaction of the existing industry. And so I think if existing industry players generally view these tools not as competitive threats, but as tools for them to use to make their own business practice and professional lives both easier and more profitable, I think it's a total win-win, and I would be a definite optimist.
Thanks very much. So in the last couple of minutes, we've got a rush of questions, and Ahmed, I'm going to put you on the spot to try and answer one or two of these. Someone says, what's going to be the next big thing for the general practice surveyor? So following on from the laptop, the web and handheld devices, what's the next big thing? That's a rather bold question to ask. And someone else is asking, how can we bridge the gap between the tech understanding of the Proptechs and the lack of tech understanding from the property companies and surveyors? So there's a knowledge gap between the Proptech people and the non-Proptech people, and what's the next big thing? So Ahmed, have a go at those two for us.
Well, the second one I think I can answer relatively easily, actually. I mean, when the government announced in 2011 that they were going to mandate something, and the construction industry was going to be forced to work in a specific way, or else you wouldn't be able to qualify for projects, I just spent all the time there was researching databases and what the government was trying to do. And so as a quantity surveyor, I've moved into this hybrid position now where I have a good enough understanding of technology not to be afraid of it and understand the context of it. And I've been a surveyor for a number of years. So it's actually an opportunity for people to kind of say, there is a gap there, why not fill it? You either take the view that you're going to train technology people to become real estate professionals, or real estate professionals give them some background knowledge and technology. I think that's quite an easy one, actually, from my point of view, because it's worked for me. But I am a data point of one, so take that with a pinch of salt. The other is, I'm going to go back to blockchain, actually, and the context of why I say this is that the internet started out was invented in 1983, and Amazon opened its doors, started up in 1994. So the technology of the internet was in the margins. Nobody knew about it for about 10 years, and blockchain and smart contracts is about 10 years old now. And in the timescale that Amazon started in 1994 to where it is now, it's changed the landscape of the high streets. It's changed the way that people shop. This startup company went from zero to competing with the biggest retailer in the world, Walmart, which now fears that it's going to encroach on it. So I would say that the blockchain space is something to watch, but it is at the starting point. And so it is still too early to say this is going to change the world. But the thing to, I think, reference is that the land registry has just finished its pilot, first pilots, and there was a semi-detached house that was transacted using a smart contract. I think it was March this year, and the findings by the land registry, it included the Customs and Excise as well. And there was there's a law firm involved there as well, and they said that they could take a transaction that would usually take about 22 weeks from end to end to about 10 minutes. I think you have to be a bit careful with that, because the first time they did a transaction, they had to do a lot of discovery and paperwork and research. So they already have the paperwork there. But you can, if you get everything ready, you can transact a property in 10 minutes. So the outcomes were speedier property transactions. I'm reading this from the Land Registry's website, which you can look up as well. More trust in transaction, higher levels of security, and increased transparency for all the participants in the transaction.
Wow. So that sounds pretty disruptive. I think we'd all like to be able to transact our house much quicker than 22 weeks. Whether we want to all get it down to 10 minutes, I think could be a question for debate. We're running out of time, so I'm going to wrap up at this point. I don't know, I'm afraid, what happened to our poll earlier on, but we'll see if we can set up one for post-webinar for people to respond to later. I want to say a special thank you to our three experts at this discussion. Firstly, Zach Schwartzman, partner at Metaprop, Anthony Walker, CEO at Go Report, and Ahmed Zagari Sales, Chairman, Construction, Blockchain and Smart Contracts Committee. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching the slides. Before you sign off, please do respond to a poll, which should be appearing on your screen, in order to rate this webinar. And that will be very useful in shaping future webinars. And finally, an announcement of our next webinar under the World Built Environment Forum is going to be about how to make a smart city. And we're going to be having a perspective from the International Finance Corporation, the IFC, sister organization of the World Bank, to talk about that. and that's on the 18th of September, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. UK time. Thank you once again, everyone, for listening. Thanks once again to our speakers, and we're going to sign off now.